Welcome to the Breadbox TTRPG's review of the Shucked Oyster. As a backer of this project on Kickstarter, as well as a fan of Black Lodge games, I've been very excited to talk about this book. Despite that background, I've had quite a complex journey with this module, one that has challenged me but ultimately made me appreciate the very unique concept this book executes on, and question the assumptions I make about the push and pull between quantity and quality. For those not in the know, the Shucked Oyster is a module for Shadowdark RPG, as well as Acts 2, written by Black Lodge Games. It centers around a particularly colorful brothel and is mechanically conceived of as a deeper exploration of Shadowdark's carousing rules. Within the book, you will find a vast cast of 30-ish NPCs with an intricate web of social connections, 3 dungeons, 2 new carousing tables, a new renown system, and an assortment of evocative magic items. The creators themselves have pitched this as a sort of DnD by way of soap opera module. This is fundamentally a 226-page carousing location, replete with bizarre and comic tripwires of drama to stumble into. The large cast of NPCs and baroque web of interests and connections between them is the centerpiece on offer here, and there is a lot to dig into. To start, I think published work that carries the Shadowdark brand is largely defined by its aesthetic sensibilities. I strongly believe that Shadowdark has at its core a dialectic of form and content that produces something greater than the sum of its parts, and wholly fresh on account of layout, font, formatting, refined mechanics, and a lithe freedom from mental burden. The Shucked Oyster, I'm happy to report, benefits greatly from this design philosophy. We've got the A5 digest format, we've got the largest font, high contrast black and white with striking line art and substantial table layouts. This synthesis of form and content is absolutely a part of this project's DNA, and I find that where the piece commits most to this design structure, it is at its best. I commend them for following this, while still imbuing it with enough of their own character that it never feels flat or soulless. The Shucked Oyster does something I love with regards to usability at the table. It lays out large amounts of information, in this case it's NPCs, in random table format. This kind of organization helps not only with navigation during play, but also in reducing mental load for the game master, a concept the authors themselves make note of in the book's text. The Oyster is meant to be dropped into any campaign setting, specifically any settlement, though I would recommend placing the Shucked Oyster in at least a moderate-sized town, not a tiny hamlet, as it does nest seamlessly into the district system within Shadowdark, which in my mind assumes a certain level of scope. Plus, the hefty size of its ensemble cast implies a certain population scale. Its expansion on the existing carousing rules are greatly appreciated at my table, as you can only lead the tavern in a wildly insulting song about a disliked noble so many times before every character in the party has a surplus of famous bard allies and are 86'd from every tavern in town. The Shucked Oyster not only adds plenty of new carousing outcomes, but those that it does add are like napalm to the best laid plans of any foolish game master. Its dungeons are clear, concise, and always show the adequate level of constraint with regards to dungeon map trappings. Their maps are utilitarian and effective, and it is to their credit. As someone interested in low prep play, these are the kinds of dungeons that I would feel empowered and not hindered by. That being said, I would have appreciated if the room descriptions had been an example where the authors respected the design demands of Shadowdark's concise and orderly form factor. If I'm running a dungeon straight from the book, a slavish sense of economy over word count is important, and this is simply not the case here, which leads to my ultimate insight. The main crux of my thoughts on the Shucked Oyster come down to its sheer scope. In particular, the scope of its cast of characters. Within its pages are 30-some-odd, and I want to emphasize odd, characters, each with an accompanying background that can span several pages and contain staggering amounts of cross-references to other NPCs. It is a baroque web to say the least, and this is where my primary critique of this piece, as well as my highest praise, comes in. The Shucked Oyster is massive, almost certainly in excess. As an appropriately ashamed post-literate slob myself, the lack of concision in this book made me squirm at times. While the book does not require anything close to a strict adherence to its letter, it does live and breathe by its aforementioned complex network of soap opera social connections, and that very level of delicate detail is overwhelmingly betrayed by the sheer tsunami of information to keep straight in your internet-pickled brain. I have found myself reading the Shucked Oyster and wanting to shout at its authors every time I turn a page and they once again betray the design limitations they themselves elected to take on by venturing into their 4th page of backstory about an eccentric NPC with a staggering amount of details to commit to memory. Reading this had me reflecting on the very modern issue with many kinds of games: quantity as a highest virtue. With entertainment at a premium, creators seem constantly under the gun to justify their product's price tag with a simply third-world level of quantity, and it is commonly understood that this design philosophy stands firmly opposite of quality. And yet, the more I reflect on this piece and pore over its pages, the clearer its own character becomes. This is a work that is bulging and bursting at the seams with detail and flavor, not because of some inhuman feedback loop to justify what humble amount they're asking for it, but because it's a product overwhelms and at times haunted by an extravagance of quality and real, honest-to-God inspiration. What do you do when you have a piece of work that is so overwhelming in its scope, but falls victim to none of the typical assumptions of diminishing quality? How do you grapple with something so vast, yet so undiluted in its sentence-to-sentence quality? You take your time. Let the fun of this book slowly reveal itself to you and your friends over time. And you take note of the fact that this is merely the first thing these men have published, a fact that is itself staggering, and you make sure to follow their future work very closely. I recall the first time I saw Boots Riley's Sorry to Bother You. The film itself, while laughably different in politics and values to that of the Shucked Oyster, which I might add is one of the book's great strengths and brings some of its most refreshing insights into ethics and ontology, I came out of the theater totally buzzed by the film. A decade-long project by its musician-turned-director, the film was a debut that had crammed into it an entire worldview and system of thought about art. There was, seemingly, not an inch of film left on the cutting room floor. It was a chaotic mess in many ways, but not starved for sincerity and genuine creativity. And it wouldn't have been half the film it was without this undeniable blemish. This is exactly the Shucked Oyster to a T, and I believe this is one of the best outcomes one could hope for a debut piece. Bringing this to a close, I've obviously given a review that was pretty much spoiler-free, not by design, but because my experience with the Shucked Oyster spoke more to me on a creative level than a mechanical one, despite it succeeding on both. Yes, the characters are hilarious in their Lynchian, Pynchon-esque to me, style. Yes, the dungeons, magic items, encounter tables, expanded carousing rules, additional monsters, and of course, the total oyster modifier are worth the price of admission and then some. But more than this, in my mind, is the sheer enthusiasm and exhaustive energy it delivers this all with. Like a weathered whore of the oyster itself, this module will give you everything you wanted, and then a wholly unnecessary ladling more, but you won't be complaining for a second of it. I've included the oyster into 2 separate campaigns now, and I found that my 1-to-1 time old school game took to it much more than my group with modern D&D pedigree. Much like its creators, it will not be everyone's cup of tea. However, it is most certainly mine. If you haven't yet, consider picking it up on DriveThruRPG, or better yet, directly from Black Lodge Games' website. Put it into your game and embrace the chaos that its own pages fail, with hilarious regularity, to contain. And God bless you.
Breadbox Tabletop Role-Playing Games. Like, subscribe, bell icon for notifications. Go in peace.